Hi, this is Mr. Evans. This video is going to look at this section on the competitive environment. You need to understand the meaning of market and competition, and you need to analyse the potential impacts of competition on businesses and identify situations when businesses face minimal or no competition. So let's define the competitive environment first. The competitive environment can be referred to the nature of a market a business operates in terms of the relationship between consumers and suppliers. A market is basically all of the providers of a product and all of the consumers of a product. Okay, so in the UK, for example, there is a huge market for coffee. Right, if you walk down any high street, you're likely to see quite a few coffee shops. That implies that there are a large number of customers who want to buy coffee, and there are a large number of suppliers who want to supply consumers with that coffee. So the market is that interaction between consumers and suppliers. There are various markets in the UK. One market that operates fairly efficiently and is quite competitive is the supermarket industry, where there has been a price war for a long time, and prices have been competed down. And a market that's accused of being less competitive is the domestic energy market, where there are quite a few competitors, but for some reason consumers are far less willing to kind of switch and shop around than they are with the supermarket. So the market doesn't work quite as well, and consumers tend to stick with their provider regardless of the price that they're paying. So a market refers to the interaction between the buyers and the relationship and the suppliers of a particular good or service, as we've defined. And the competition, this is the companies who are aiming their similar products at the same group of customers. So it can be quite tricky, more tricky than it sounds, to identify the competitors of a company. So for example, if you just think of the competitors of Ryanair for a moment, you might say EasyJet, British Airways, and list some other airlines. Well, that's fair enough. But also you could start to think about, well, what's the product that they sell? Ryanair try and fly people to short-haul destinations, Paris, Prague, Rome. Well, how else could people get there? Maybe they could get there by coach and ferry and car. So, if you think that the product is getting someone to a particular destination, then that opens up our idea of what competition is. Equally, if you've got kind of a cheap kebab shop next to a fish and chip shop, those two companies might be competing with each other. Those two businesses might be competing. But if you've kind of got a gourmet French restaurant next to them, are they really competition? Are people really going to either go for a kebab or a gourmet restaurant? So competition can be, defining competition can be a bit trickier than you think. But basically, competition are the companies who are aiming their similar products at the same group of consumers. And some markets are very, very competitive, and other markets are less so. So what are some situations when businesses face low competition? Well, when a product has a fairly unique product, like Google. I'm not saying that there aren't other search engines out there. There's Bing and there's Yahoo, but Google tends to be the main product that people use in that industry. It's got a huge market share. If a business is the only provider in that area, so a supermarket in a small town where there's only one supermarket might have, they've got relatively low amounts of competition. People have to go to that place if they want to go to a supermarket. Also, trains often, most places in the UK, if you get a train, there's only one train provider. If the business is in a niche market, it might not have that much competition. If the market is relatively small, it's a market niche. For example, this is a magazine aimed at rock climbers. That might be a relatively small market in the UK, and therefore this magazine might be quite successful because there's not really room for two magazines targeting these people. There's not there's not enough business for them. So they might not face too much competition. And if a business has a patent to protect their unique ideas, so sometimes businesses can buy like a legal protection that means that people can't copy their business idea, and if that's the case, they might not face too much competition. So what impact does a lack of competition have on businesses? Well, if there is lots of competition, the business won't be able to set a high selling price, because otherwise people will just go to their competitors. That's not always true. Some businesses sell at a premium price on purpose in order to compete, but often the impact on competition means that prices are competed downwards. Businesses need to spend more money on promoting their products. You've got to attract customers away from your competitors and come to you. So therefore, you're going to have to develop a unique selling point, something to make your product stand out, and a strong brand to attract customers. You need to differentiate your product, in other words. The likelihood is, if there's competition, you're going to have a lower level of sales, because some consumers will go to the competitors. So you're not going to sell as much as you might otherwise. Businesses, might also need to innovate and spend money on research and development, research into new products, developing new products that are exciting, innovative, and are going to attract customers to them. If you're in a market without too much competition, then why would you bother doing that? And there's a huge incentive for these businesses to reduce their cost of production. So, because if you reduce your cost of production, you can cut your selling price to be able to compete. So whilst lots of businesses don't like the impact of competition, you can see how competition is very, very good for consumers, and the government often wants to encourage business competition because it drives efficiency, basically. It makes businesses compete with each other, cut prices, improve product standards for consumers, and it can be very beneficial for consumers if they have a range of companies to choose from.